Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel, the unusual show that, looks at the weird and wonderful world of music and all the many different things it has to offer us, essentially. So yes, of course, in today's episode, we are returning to Falt Records, aren't we? So yes, this label, it's one that I'm always essentially digging through, discovering the weird audio experiments people have been, taking themselves upon over the many years this label has been active. So yes, in today's episode, we're actually reviewing one of my top favourite albums from the label's extensive discography, an experimental collaboration between two amazing artists from Japan, resulting in some very ethereal lowercase music. This album has been floating around the back of my mind to review at some point, and eventually I just got around to finally writing some thoughts about it. So, without further ado, I present Undercurrent Wanderlust by Ayami Suzuki and Leo Okagawa. So, of course, who are Ayami Suzuki and Leo Okagawa? Well, if we start with Ayami Suzuki, she is a Tokyo-based musician, artist and improviser whose ambient soundscapes incorporate a lot of folk influences, including extensive use of her own vocals, to create these absolutely gorgeous droning soundscapes that pull you into the emotion of the human voice and how it sounds when it's... and all the incredible emotion that comes with it, essentially. But of course, on this album, she's joined by the one and only Leo Okagawa, another Japanese artist based in Tokyo, whose large discography offers up an array of experimental releases utilising edited field recordings and raw noises. And so joining their experimental forces together, we have Undercurrent Wanderlust, a 2-track album sourced from live recordings that was released on cassette back in 2021 by Falt Records, when they were still releasing things on cassette in their peculiar paper packages. And so yes, as mentioned, this is without a doubt one of my top favourite things to have come from Falt Records, Undercurrent Wanderlust is a peculiar experimental drone experience that utilises the thinly strewn electronics of Leo Okagawa to create these really fascinating frequencies, while Suzuki just layers her voice into her array of pedal effects to create this ghostly presence that sits upon it all. It's a fascinating album, and I'm very excited to discuss it, so let's dive in. So opening up with Undercurrent, this roughly 25-minute track was recorded live at Permian, Tokyo, Japan on November 26, 2020. And so slowly setting the scene with some brief intermittent vocalizations from Ayami Suzuki, we kind of get this sense of small, dusty, empty rooms, just humming and vocalizing away to oneself, slowly creating the groundwork for the greater, bigger experience that is going to slowly evolve from all of this. And in the background, you do have these very unusual faint frequencies emerging from Leo Okagawa, resonating away like tiny, minute micro sounds burrowing its way inside your very ear canals. As unusual as it sounds though, it's accompanied by these slowly evolving vocalizations from Suzuki, which become longer, more assured, and a little bit more confident as they start to fill up the empty space with this incredibly gracious presence, before eventually receding away into the silence, letting those frequencies from Leo Okagawa take the forefront for just a few more moments. But that is until Suzuki starts to work with the pedal effects, taking those aforementioned vocalizations and turning them into these incredibly long, slow evolving drones, adding in reverb and delay effects that just expand them out into these big stretched out sounds. All the while, you've still got Okagawa just improvising away on those electronics, just turning them into these absurd little frequencies and fiddling with the buttons and switches, and that end up changing the landscape entirely, like newly appeared filters going right over the visual presentation. It's interesting because you get a couple of minutes of this and you're getting oddly comfortable with the setting as the vocalizations become much more abstract, turning into these elongated drones accompanied by this constant barrage of lowercase noise and interference. It almost feels like, to me, like two battling forces, one beautiful in the form of Suzuki's voice, and one just panicking away in the form of Okagawa's terrifying frequencies. And they just offset the scene, and yet create such an engrossing soundscape as a result of all of this. Like, it's very strange without a doubt, but I find it to be one of the most enigmatic and delightful releases in the entire Falt catalogue, and easily one of my most listened to albums from the label. Of course, as it all develops, it slowly evolves into much more of a droning soundscape, with Okagawa adding in some very peculiar yet delightful rumbling low ends. Pure minimalism that accompanies the constant intertwining quality persistent in those droning vocals. And there's something absurdly strange and beautiful about the music, really delving deep into the improvisational experimentalism to pull out something that is truly fascinating, I feel. Like, Okagawa's contributions remain some of the more enigmatic parts of this album, and his sound palette opts for very high frequencies and rumbling low ends. Although I find it to arguably be the more challenging aspect of the music itself, the way in which it adds so much to the atmosphere and the vibe being presented is truly spectacular, especially the more as it all develops, where those electronic drones become almost indistinguishable against the backdrop of treated vocals, ran through the myriad of effects pedals by Suzuki as she continues to add in new layers into the composition itself. Like, it all just seems to slowly move along, pulling you into that incredibly strange soundscape that becomes oddly comfortable and delightful the more it all progresses, lulling you into this strange sense of being as it becomes much more liminal and peculiar. To get back to discussing the composition though, like, as this progresses though, as delightful it is, the more abstract it seems to become as well. Like, Okagawa seems to really turn those frequencies into these very delightful beds of lowercase drone and noise, adding in some lovely elements of static hissing midway into the composition, accompanying the ebb and flow of these pulsating drones that have now occupied the landscape and come that main forefront of the entire experience. But even when he just pours on more and more of those strange abstractions, it all seems to work in such a delightful manner, delightfully intertwining into Suzuki's vocal passages that continue to just loop over and over and create that ethereal, beautiful experience. It's interesting because what felt oddly challenging and peculiar to begin with, perhaps, has now turned into something so delightfully comfortable, even when it strays into those more abstract and tumultuous areas from time to time. And with it being such a long composition, we have so much time to just get used to it, get comfortable with the overall vibe that the music is presenting, with those strange abstract qualities becoming the very characteristics that make us feel oddly comfortable when listening to the pieces. And I just find that when I listen to it, I just become so delightfully lulled by the entire experience, so easily pulled into that strange soundscape that the music is presenting, that I just want to sit there and just let the entire thing wash over for 20 minutes, letting myself become completely lost and untethered in time as the music just dilates my perception entirely, it feels. Like, it's weird because it's so peculiar and distinctly lowercase at times for the most part, really drawing a lot from pure minimalism. And yet it is one of the most delightful and charming releases I think I've ever experienced from this branch of experimental music, perhaps. Like, it remains so delightfully enigmatic and mysterious, throwing in such odd areas of music that feel so strange and unusual, and yet I cannot help but feel swayed by the entire experience, so moved by the characteristics evident on the music itself, from the strange thin frequencies of Leo Okagawa that add in so much character, to those gorgeous vocalizations from Ayami Suzuki that create such wonderful beds of ambient drone. It is truly amazing stuff. Moving on to the next track though, on the cassette you would flip it over and you would get onto track 2, Wanderlust, which was recorded live at Futari, Tokyo, Japan on October 3rd, 2020, which I believe is there is actually a full video for this performance on YouTube as well that you can watch. And so whilst Undercurrent opened up with some brief vocals from Suzuki, Wanderlust instead opens up with Okagawa, creating this slow ebbing pulsating sound, resonating in the space alongside some faint frequencies, slowly building themselves up before Suzuki comes in with those vocalizations, of course. And the scene is one that feels a little bit more cautionary than the track that has preceded it, perhaps, a sense of confusion seeping in as the sounds start to slowly evolve and set the scene. And with that constant pulse from the electronics, it creates this almost slow minimalist beat that pushes forward with this unusual momentum, stretching it all along as Suzuki continues to just gently vocalize over the top of everything that is occurring. And with the sort of caution that Okagawa establishes with his electronics here, it almost feels as though Suzuki's vocals are pulling it through an unusual semblance of reality, out of the pure abstraction and into something that has a bit more form, albeit still strange in this very design, right? But as it pushes a bit along, it starts to become, it starts to once again evolve like the previous track though, as Suzuki begins layering those vocals on top of one another, using her natural form of music composition of just growing layers and layers and loops of vocalized drones. And it creates these gentle beds of ambient sounds whilst Okagawa continues to play around with those unusual frequencies once again. It once again becomes a strange and unusual experience to be a part of. But the result of these two odd forces coming together, is something so ethereal and otherworldly about it, mostly due to the unusual interplay, from Okagawa's electronics and Suzuki's voice. In terms of literal sounds, they feel almost worlds apart and of different genres perhaps. But it's come together here on this album in such a fascinating way that I think is truly delightful. What is really wonderful though is when it all just seems to fall into pure experimentalism though, with Suzuki turning those vocals into those long droning passages, whilst Okagawa creates some very delightful granular textures to accompany them on this one. The electronics just seem to just fizzle in your head, like they're capturing a pure static caught in amongst radio airwaves, as Suzuki's voice just transforms it at the push of a button, looped and layered and affected with so many delays and reverbs it seems. And there's something so delightfully strange about it, especially with how tumultuous Okagawa's grainy tones start to become on this one, building and building with unusual effects and resonating in the space alongside the elongated vocal passages. The wonderful interplay between the two elements just creates something so unusual but oddly harmonious, I have to say, something that is so distinctly otherworldly and strange. And yet, for someone like myself who's so interested in experimental music, I find it so inviting. Something that is just a wonderful experience within the realms of experimental improvisational music. It is such an unusual experience though, because once again Okagawa is really pushing the capability of those frequencies to such unusual levels, at times holding them in the middle of those spaces as they just rattle in your very brain, just drilling further and further inwards as they threaten to tear everything apart, only for it all to just recede and disappear, leaving behind this myriad of textural drones from electronic to looped vocals. It is such a strange soundscape to inhabit, and it's one that does feel oddly challenging at times, of course, but yet embedded deep within this world of frequencies and drones is something that I think is bizarre and delightful. I think what I adore here is, just as I've mentioned, that interplay between the two distinct elements that are Suzuki's voice and pedals and Okagawa's electronic performances here. Both musicians seem to have such a precise understanding and control over their respective instruments, not letting the conventions of sound and music restrict their experimentation of their improvisations, but instead letting the experiments themselves dictate how it all sounds and comes across, and interplaying it into each other's stuff as well. There's something amazing about how all those elements come together, even when Okagawa lets those electronics just whine with this almost discordant feedback, this deluge of high-pitched frequencies and panicking electronics it feels. But even though the more challenging of Okagawa's experimentations feel the most bewildering, there's actually even some wonderful experimental sounds from Suzuki herself, who really plays around with her pedal effect to turn her vocals into some really strange sounding drones at times. Armed only with her voice though, she creates these wonderful beds of sound that become so strange, sounding nothing like voices for certain passages, before slowly evolving back up into these longer, more musical moments it feels. It's so bewildering, yet so fascinating, and it's the constant interplay between the two distinct elements of both Suzuki and Okagawa's music that results in what is so fascinating here. It feels almost disparate to a certain extent, on paper, the marrying together of these two distinct styles, I feel like it shouldn't really work. Vocals and frequencies. And yet, it all comes together to create something just absolutely wonderful, so wholly different, and just wonderfully emotive as well in the world of experimental music. It might just perhaps feel so emotive in part to how the human voice just carries with it a weight of emotion, essentially, Especially with how Suzuki performs it, especially towards the end of this one, you get some really beautiful emotional vocals from Suzuki looped over into this bed of ambient layers, and it's offset but with all those unusual frequencies electronics, of course. It just makes for something that is bewildering and fascinating, something that isn't easy to truly explain or discern, but I just know that I adore it though. It just captures in me my fascination with both experimental improvisational music and just the human voice and how it carries with it just this natural sounding qualities that make it sound so heavy and emotional at times. To kind of summarise this whole album though, I have to say, without a doubt, one of my favourite things I've come across on Falt Records. It was because of this album I actually went out to check out some more works by both Suzuki and Okagawa. I think both of their albums ended up in the best of 2023 list actually. A collaborative album between Okagawa and then Passages by Suzuki, which is an album I really want to review at some point, but I just haven't got around to it. Here though, their experimentation, in the world in music just results in a truly fascinating album though. But it's amazing their solo stuff because they just create such amazing stuff as well. Suzuki, just with the voice and pedals of course, just has these wonderfully gorgeous ambient drone experiences that just carry your emotions to those faraway places. And then conversely, the way in which Okagawa plays around with frequencies to such amazing levels, letting faint minimalist notions create such distinct details on the many different albums he's worked on, essentially. It is delightful seeing their names crop up every now and then in my constant discovery of new music. And it all stems from first experiencing this album here, which to me is a little bit of an enigma from Falt Records. As a fan of the label, I kind of find a lot of their albums in the catalogue to be these strange, bewildering experimentations in sound, never adhering to the listenability of what is being created. Some albums are so completely caustic and overwhelming, whilst others are very strange and otherworldly. But few feel quite as emotive as Undercurrent Wanderlust. Something about this particular collaboration has resulted in something that just seems to touch me right to my very being, something that pulls me on this incredibly emotional journey which I find to be truly spectacular. And it's just the thing I adore in music though. And yeah, it surprises me a little bit to find it from Falt Records, which I equate to more extreme experimentalism, but that is of course the beauty of music, finding such wonderful things in the strangest of places. And I adore the label and the incredibly strange music they have pushed out, as it's easily some of the most enigmatic music I think I've ever had the fortune to come across. This is something that feels very special to me, and I think it might just be my top favourite release from the label. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I absolutely adore Luft by Sandra Boss, which I do own a physical copy of. That is a truly spectacular album, as well as Sivuka Klui's and Matt Biskuski's You Settle On Movement, which was the very first album by Falt Records we ever looked at. That lowercase grumbling of an album is just truly wonderful to just get lost with it for 80 minutes. But this is a truly gorgeous thing. Challenging and unusual, but it's something that carries beauty and emotion through its experimentation. Just a wonderful collaboration from two amazing musicians. And so I think with that, we will be coming to the end of our episode of Weird Music. So glad to be returning to Falt Records. It's one of those labels that I do want to be exploring more on this channel, hence why I have made the Falt Records playlist on the channel. Because there's just such a wonderful extensive catalogue of releases that covers so much ground in the world of experimental music. And as mentioned, Undercurrent Wanderlust, without a doubt one of my top favourites from this label. A truly beautiful album that feels so challenging at times and yet so gorgeous at the same time as well. And just a fantastic collaboration from Suzuki and Okagawa here. So yes, if you've made it this far into the video, I would like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music, and as I say every time on these videos, if you have ever delved into the catalogue of Falt Records, then please let us know in the comments what some of your favourite releases are. With there being so much, there's still so much I haven't actually discovered, and so any recommendations from you watching now would just be greatly appreciated, considering as well, I should mention, how many of you watching have actually been releasing albums on Falt Records, right? I see you there. I know your albums are on there. I've listened to them. But yes, if not, like I say, I will keep doing what I'm doing, which is just trawling through the label and covering whatever piques my curiosity from time to time. With that, though, I wish you all the best. Hope you take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.